Bare knuckle punching. For some reason, everybody in my comment section is obsessed with how to throw bare knuckle punches. For me, this is saying one of two things. Either A, you want to fight in the bare knuckle fighting championship, in which case I don't really want to talk to you because you're a crazy person, or you're so concerned about learning to fight in the streets that you're a crazy person and I don't want to talk to you either way. But that doesn't mean there's no reason to learn how to throw bare knuckle punches. If you can punch properly without anything on your hands, that means you can always punch properly. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys a couple different ways that I like to throw bare knuckle punches. Keep in mind, we're talking about the ways I like to throw it, not necessarily the only way to do it. All that being said, make sure you're subscribed and you have notifications turned on, and let's get started. Boom! So for the purposes of this video, we're going to talk only about throwing straight punches down the line, and we're going to isolate them down to either talking about vertical punches, meaning our knuckles run perpendicular to the ground. Perpendicular? Yeah, that's the one. Or rounded punches, where our knuckles are now parallel to the ground. They look pretty similar, meaning if I'm going to throw a punch like this or a punch like this, we're really just talking about corkscrewing the wrist, right? Yes and no, because you're actually hitting with different parts of your hands with the different version of the punch. With the vertical fist, I'm actually hitting with the bottom 3 knuckles of my hand, meaning I'm lining up the punch from my middle finger, ring finger, and pinky all the way down the forearm. This way, the skeletal and muscular structure in my arm is reinforcing the punch, meaning I'm not at risk of breaking my wrist. Now, if I hit with only the pinky, that's how I get the boxer's fracture. But that's going to be true whether we're talking about rounded punches or vertical punches. I have a straight power line from my arm to my body through to the target. Now, if you do some Wing Chun or Kung Fu, sometimes when you punch, they might corkscrew the hand up. That's a valuable thing to do. I'm not a huge fan of it. I like keeping my hands straight down the line, again, for the purpose of protecting my wrist. Now, if we're talking about rounded punches, I'm actually instead trying to hit with these 2 knuckles, meaning I'm trying to make contact with the index and middle finger, and really mostly with the middle finger. In this case, what I'm doing is lining up the bones all the way down this way in my arm. Rather than lining up from here, it's now more on the top of my arm back into my shoulder, which, instead of making me keep my wrist straight like this, is when I want to add that curve of the wrist. I let my wrist turn over slightly so that here I'm lining up my 2 knuckles like a scope. This is my sight to look right down at my target. So from here, this is a straightforward punch and this is a rounded punch. Now there's a very simple exercise I like to do to help people figure out how they throw the vertical punch and throw the rounded punch. And that's with some simple push-ups. And just like in Cobra Kai, I'm going to do them on my knuckles. But this is not so much to gain strength as it is to figure out, again, the proper way to align my wrist for punching. So I'm going to get here on my chest, and for right now we're going to start with the vertical punches. I'm going to take my hands here and line them up on the ground. My goal from here is to push myself off the ground. What you're hopefully noticing at this point is that I'm pushing off the last 3 knuckles of my hand. If I roll forward like this, you can see that yes, I'm on the front 2 knuckles, but my wrist is very strained trying to hold my weight. Whereas if I let myself sit back like this is much more comfortable. I can hold this high plank pretty much all day long. From here I'm going to drop, make sure my wrist is still staying tight, and then press up. This is accomplishing a few different things. This is A, help me figure out how to line up my wrist for punching, and how to maintain tension when I'm punching. If I let my wrist go limp here, I'm going to fall to the ground and probably break it. So this is reinforcing the proper tension that I'm going to need for punching, as well as teaching me how I want to line up my hands. When it comes to the rounded punching, I'm not going to necessarily go all the way full motorcycle handle. I'm instead going to get on my chest again and now turn my knuckles in and find the comfortable position for my index and middle knuckle to sit on the floor, which is going to be right about here. Just like earlier, I'm going to inhale, boom, press up off the ground, making sure my wrist is in line with my forearm, with my hand, and with my bicep. Now when it comes to choosing whether you're going to punch with the hand straight up or the hand rounded over like this, I tend to think you need to worry more about how good you are at actually punching. If you're worried that you might not have the best technique, I would stick with the vertical fist, because it's very hard to hurt yourself if you punch like this. I can throw more or less as many punches as I want, and my fist is backed up by my forearm, bicep, and back. If you want to get slightly more power out of your punch and slightly more whip into your opponent, work on corkscrewing that hand over. This is a little riskier because now I'm turning my wrist, meaning it has to be slightly more fluid, meaning I can now hurt myself, but the reward might be a little better. And by the way, as for me personally, I actually combine throwing both the vertical fist and the rounded punch. And what I like about it is that I think I had a tendency to flare my elbow whenever I threw my jab, which led to getting countered, parried, or avoided altogether. But now that I keep my hand vertical like this, I find that I'm landing my jab a lot more often, which, when you do land your jab, opens your opponent up for that straight right. Really, it comes down to knowing what your tendencies are and what you're more comfortable with, and ultimately, which one you want to practice. You're only going to be able to perform the way you practice. As for considerations when throwing bare knuckle punches, when you have the benefit of wearing gloves, you can throw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many punch combinations as you want, and the risk of hurting yourself is very small. But when you don't have any protection on your hand at all, people tend to throw a lot less volume and more precise shots. Meaning, instead of coming here and going, bop, 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 any one of those shots could be damaging enough to my hand to where I get hurt. So instead, I'm going to focus on 1, 2, move, 2, 3, bam, bam, right? 2 or 3 shots at a time. And that's for a couple different reasons. Firstly, like I said, is because the more strikes I'm throwing, the more likely I am to get countered or to hurt myself. But also because I don't have as many targets available to me when I'm bare knuckle. Think about it. These tiny bones in my hand cannot take a lot of impact. And if I land one of them on my opponent's skull or somewhere hard like that, then that could take me out of the fight immediately. So I need to wait for the opening. I need to wait until I see the soft, fleshy part of the cheek or the jawline or the body. My theory is if you're going to be training bare knuckle, you need to spend a lot of time targeting the body because most people aren't built like me, i.e. a god, and they have soft, squishy bodies you can punch pretty much all day long. So, in general, if you're going to be training and fighting bare knuckle, you want to be very precise to the head and go a little more ham on the body. Consideration number 2 is the basic stance when you're bare knuckle. Now, when you're standing in boxing gloves, this is a shelled up guard. Your hands are pinned right to your face, and the size of the glove means you're basically standing in a phalanx. You have a giant shield protecting most of your face, and your elbows are protecting your body. Not so when you don't have gloves on. Even if you're wearing little 4-ounce MMA gloves, you're still offered a little bit of shielding and a little bit of padding. But you'll see that most MMA fighters tend to not shell up quite this tightly. They tend to let themselves rock a little bit forward. Now that I don't have anything on my hands, I'm going to let myself come even farther out. Because now I need to focus a little bit less on shelling up here and more on countering and seizing opportunities when they come to me. This tends to lead to a longer stance that people associate with Old English boxing. Now, this isn't meant to symbolize me hiding from my opponent to slap him away from me. It's more giving me more opportunity to read when he's striking so that I can block and counter right away. So, when you're fighting bare knuckle or if you're training bare knuckle, try not to hide straight here. Try to be a little bit longer with your stance. Now, that's not to say there's never a time to be tight in the guard, because this will definitely offer some protection, but the vertical guard that we see with boxing gloves is not necessarily the best option when you're standing bare knuckle. The thing about stances is you never want to be married to any one stance at any given time. I'm suggesting that you stand in a longer guard bare knuckle than you might when you have gloves on. But that doesn't mean you always have to do that. The thing that I'm suggesting against is trying to defend yourself only like this. And it's not so much that this isn't good at defending you, but it's because it's not good at offending your opponent. Because if I'm catching punches on my forearm right here, it's not necessarily doing damage to my opponent. But over time, that will do damage to me. So instead of standing like this, we can weaponize defending ourselves against bare knuckle punches by crossing our arms and trying to catch punches now on the elbows. If I'm more fluid with the way I defend myself, I'm more likely to catch my opponent's knuckle on the elbow or on the harder part of my forearm. I'm advocating that you let your arms cross over, as is more comfortable and more prevalent in Kung Fu, Kali, and when Paulo Costa's afraid of fighting somebody. Just because we're talking about bare knuckle straight punching doesn't mean we only have to talk about bare knuckle straight punching. Because yes, I can throw a vertical fist, I can throw a rounded fist, I can also throw a heel palm strike, or I can throw a slap, which you guys know I'm a big fan of. And if you want to learn how to throw those 2 strikes, make sure you click the link in the card right here, or here, wherever it's at right there. Or I can also use forearm strikes. I can use hammer fist strikes. I have a lot more available to me than just 4-knuckle striking. For the purpose of this video, that's what we're talking about. But don't get tunnel vision. Don't get so obsessed with only boxing that this is the only thing you rely on. Because the fact of the matter is, if you don't have the best punching technique, this probably won't be the way you want to punch. Now, you want to practice and get better at it, but if push comes to shove and you have to get in a self-defense situation, maybe rely on a slap, or a heel palm strike, or an elbow. you don't only have to focus on boxing, but it's a great tool to have in your arsenal. Now, there's a common misconception that you can hit much harder with boxing gloves than you can bare knuckle. And that's not so much wrong as it is a misunderstanding. Because a 100% punch is a 100% punch. The difference is that the boxing glove and the wraps are not so much protective equipment as they are weapons. They are force multipliers. Meaning, if this right here is my 100% punch bare knuckle, that 100% is multiplied to 250%. Meaning, if my bare knuckle punch is weak as shit, it's still gonna be weak as shit even though I have a glove on. You have to have proper punching mechanics no matter what you're wearing. All that being said, you guys, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope this helps your bare knuckle training technique, your glove training technique, your kicking technique somehow. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure to subscribe, tap the notification bell, like, share, and leave a comment. If you want to help the channel, head on over to combatsd.square.site, where you can pick up the official Combat Self-Defense t-shirt, tank top, coffee mug, or anything else we have on the site. This has been Rob from Combat Self-Defense. I want to thank you guys for all the hard work. Thank you for the hard work yet to be done, and I'll see you next time. Wow.